Discover your inner goddess and live up to your highest value and most abundant potential. Welcome to Grateful Goddesses, a podcast that empowers you to unleash your inner goddess and take the leap of faith to live your best life. Your guide, Karen Pulver, joins her fellow goddesses in soulful conversations about gratitude, personal growth, authentic living, and a bevy of topics affecting women today. Let's start the show with your host, Karen Pulver.
Thank you for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. So, a picture says 1,000 words, right? Well, I decided that one of the things that I was actually scared to do was take pictures. I know that sounds crazy. I am being vulnerable telling you this because it's such a simple thing that everyone does now, especially with their phones. But I decided a couple of years ago to take a photography class. And here in Chicago, I went and I learned all the mechanics of the camera, and we had to do these assignments every week. And we were in manual mode, so it had to be really, 101. And so we would go and take pictures of the different assignments and things that we were doing. And every week we had to put our photos up on the wall, and we took a look. We circled around and took a look at everyone's photos, and people said which ones they loved and why. Well, mine were never chosen. So needless to say, I was determined to, get that picture that everyone would love. And I was trying so hard. But one day I walked into a candy store and I was looking at the colorful candies, and this girl walked in. She was probably 17 or 18. She had piercings, she had purple hair, she had a colorful outfit on. And I looked at her looking at the lollipop tree, and I was on the other side and I saw her looking, and she looked like a little girl, even though she was in her late teens. I grabbed my camera, snapped the picture. Well, that was recognized in my class as being a great photo. And I was just so honored. But I realized at that moment, for me, I learned it wasn't about posing the people or trying so hard to get that perfect shot. For me, it was about capturing the moment of this girl that was trying so hard to be so grown up and be different, yet she wanted that lollipop. So today our guest is Paige Parsons, and she captures moments. She captures people in authentic situations, in laughter, in joy, in sorrow. She is a photographer.
Hi, I'm Paige. I'm many things. I'm an MIT grad, I'm a mom, I'm dyslexic. But for the purpose of this talk, I'm a photographer and an artist. I try and capture what it's like to be human, to be alive, to love, to feel joy, to be present. When I photograph, I'm always searching for a moment of vulnerability and authenticity, joy and connection. Empathy is my currency, my camera is my instrument, serendipity is my muse. Whether it's for rock stars, academics, or toddlers, by putting my art in the world, I create physical memories that I've imbibed with meaning. The skill and craft of my art combines with my beliefs to purposely shape people's attention and memory, to focus that attention on joy and connection. I want to promote messages of courage, compassion, joy, and kindness in a world that normally doesn't focus on these core aspects of being human. Through my photography, I try and shed a compassionate light on our shared humanity and on our need for connection. I didn't start out with this goal in mind. In fact, when I was younger, I didn't even know I had a choice to choose my own life's goal. I was shy. I was timid. I was brought up to believe that a modern young woman should be educated primarily so she could support herself and be independent. Everything else good in life flowed out of this independence. As it happened, I studied a semester abroad my junior year in Florence, Italy. For the first time, I was exposed to traditional photography and darkroom techniques. When I returned to the States, to MIT, I began photographing and writing concert reviews for the Tech. I continued with photography classes at the Media Lab. However, as much as I love photography, it never crossed my mind that photography could be my career. Photography and music were an aside, an escape that filled my soul, but not my bank account. After I graduated Course 4 in architecture, I went on to use my visual and analytical skills to design some of the first web-based user interfaces for companies such as Apple and Netscape. I might have continued indefinitely on that path if it weren't for the birth of my children, Emma and Gus. They cracked my heart wide open. They gave me the gift of feeling truly vulnerable for the first time in my life. As is the case with many proud parents, I wanted to document their early days. My timing was fortuitous. The digital camera revolution had just begun, and I've always had a penchant for cool digital toys and tools. For better or worse, my kids and their classmates have some of the most extensively documented childhoods of the early 2000s. So, how did this lead to me being a rock photographer? If there's been one constant in my life, it's been my love of live music. Concerts are where I've always felt the most connected to the world. Since I was a teen, not a month has gone by where I haven't been at some kind of concert. The synergy of my love of music, photography, and digital tools finally came together in my late 30s. My real aha moment happened in the summer of 2007. That's where I crossed paths with Matt Allen, aka the Ice Cream Man, at the Lollapalooza Music Festival in Chicago. What is Ice Cream Man? The Ice Cream Man organization was created with the goal to give away 500,000 free bars of ice cream, most often at music festivals. Why free ice cream? It was a small, simple, ephemeral act of kindness. Ice Cream Man wanted to show the world you can follow your dream, no matter how crazy. And through small acts of kindness, you can inspire others to be kind and to follow their own dreams. His message and his philosophy resonated with me. Thus, I began photographing music festivals and concerts and giving away ice cream with the Ice Cream Man crew. No, I didn't leave my family and start living on an ice cream truck, but I did begin to listen to my heart and transition my career from UI design to photography. These days, I'm the house photographer for the iconic Fillmore in San Francisco, as well as several other venues and music festivals in the Bay Area. I often shoot at night and edit photos during the day. I love this schedule. It allows me to be at home after school and to be present for my kids. One of the most common questions I'm asked is, what's your favorite show? What's your favorite picture? Honestly, these aren't the things that stick out for me. The most memorable things are when I'm able to have a connection. Sometimes it's with an artist, sometimes it's with the audience, sometimes it's with friends. If I had to pick one thing that brings me joy in shooting, it would have to be when I hear from the parent of a performer. Twice I've been contacted by parents of musicians who wanted a print because they felt I captured the essence of their child. To me, there's no greater honor nor better judge of an image than someone's parent. And no, I haven't yet heard from Madonna's dad, but I'll be excited if I ever get that call. And rock stars' parents aren't the only parents that motivate me. Over the past 15 years, I've taken over 20,000 images at my children's school. It's a progressive school that was founded in the 1920s. There are 200 preschool through 8th grade children involved in project-based learning, without grades, without shoes, and with genuine respect between teachers and students. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. I love being able to document the unique place that is Peninsula School for the kids, the parents, and the entire community. Over the past 10 years, I've also taught several short courses on photography to the middle school kids at Peninsula. It's rewarding to see the passion for photography develop in so many of these bright young teens. I consciously choose the types of clients I want to work with as well. In addition to my live music photography and volunteer work with schools, I'm the house photographer for the Clayman Institute for Gender Research at Stanford, documenting the work they do on behalf of gender equality. I also photograph for the nonprofit Challenge Success. Challenge Success partners with schools, families, and communities to promote a broad definition of success and to implement research-based strategies so that all kids are healthy and engaged with learning. By documenting the work of these nonprofits, I'm helping to spread my beliefs in an equitable society. More broadly, by making and spreading art that features passion, joy, and connection, I'm drawing attention to their importance. I want my photography to remind you, you are not alone. I hope that when you see my pictures, you feel connected to others. I focus on music because music cuts through our cynicism and breaks down the barriers that we erect between ourselves and the rest of the world. I also want my photography to remind you to be brave. I believe kind people are brave people. Brave isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. A decision that compassion is more important than fear, more important than fitting in, more important than following the crowd. As a woman, I found out late in life that one of the bravest things you can do in our society is to be kind to yourself. Finally, I want my photography to remind you to listen to your heart, your intuition. It's all too easy to try and shut down our feelings and make decisions based purely on logic. I want to challenge you to be open to listening to your heart as well. It's not an either or, it's a both and. By listening to both your head and your heart, you're being both a brave and a responsible person. When you are authentic and true to yourself, you can bring your singular uniqueness to the table. You can also serve as an example for your kids, your mentees, and for the many people around you. We all have a choice about where we put our attention and effort. It's through our shared empathy and action that we can change the world.
So, Paige, what do you think about my story about capturing that moment? I'm so curious, you as a photographer, what your thoughts are.
I love hearing about that moment because you're so right. That's what capturing a moment's. It's not about posing something, I think, or putting it together, but it's just seeing something and seeing something that moves you and wanting to capture that and share that connection with somebody else. And I also love the story of this little girl who, wants to be so grown up and I think that also captures your perspective as well too, as being older and having gone through it and knowing, you're not so grown up yet. And even the juxtaposition of being in a candy store is lovely.
Yeah, it just made me so happy when I found that and I captured it, and I wasn't like sitting them down for, this pose, smile. And I noticed that in your work, you seem to capture those moments. I'd like to go back, though, to how you and I met. Do you want to tell people who are listening, viewing, or reading the blog on Grateful Goddesses how that happened, that encounter? Do you remember?
I do. Actually, I can tell you a little bit about it, but I was thinking about it over the last couple of days, and I was thinking, that's more your story than mine, because from my point of view, it's really simple in that I got a phone message from somebody who was interested in what I did and wanted to talk to me. And I do a fair amount of public speaking and things like that. So I didn't recognize your name, nor did I recognize the context, but I still reached out because that's just what I tend to do. I tend to try to say yes to opportunities that might present themselves to me. So
I was actually trying to connect with a Paige Parsons, who's a wellness coach. Oh. And I looked up a number and I decided to call you, or Paige, out there. And I started talking with you, and you started to tell me about that you're a photographer. And I was like, oh my gosh, wait, this is the wrong page. Hold on a second. But then as we were talking and I was looking up on my computer what you do and what you're currently working on, I was blown away. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is someone, like, here we are meeting serendipitously, but yet it was meant to be. We're meant to talk today and share your story. Can you tell us a little bit more about your journey of Paige? When you were younger, was this a passion of yours? And then how did it lead up to what you're doing today?
Sure, I'd love to. The funny thing is that when I was younger, I used to go to, music has always been a passion of mine. Photography, my best friend always brought a little disc camera to all the concerts that we went to back in high school. And I thought, oh, she's got it. I was always very in the moment and not so much worried about documenting things. when I went off to college, I did take several photography courses because it was something that really interested me once I had a real camera. But I never imagined or even told myself that that was something that I could do as a career. You know, I was really taught growing up that it was important to be independent, and that to be independent, you had to support yourself, and that you really, that the only way really to do that was to do something technical. I think because I was fairly gifted in like, math and science areas and things like that. And I just said, well, okay, I didn't really understand that it was my own choice to choose my life's goal. I just thought that I, should listen to my parents. And the funny thing is about that is that I certainly didn't listen to them about a lot of other things. So I have no idea why I was listening to them about, what I should do in school. But I shot for the school newspaper. I took photography courses, but I went on to do a lot of user experience work and other work having to do with people and connection, but not with photography. And it wasn't until the birth of my children and the digital camera revolution was taking off that I realized, I really enjoy doing this. And then there was a serendipitous moment when I was going to Lollapalooza and I met up with this guy, the ice cream man. And I realized he was able to get me an official photo pass that it was like, oh, I could do this. Like, I enjoy doing this. And I have a lot of choices at this point in my life, as I've taken some time off the crazy train of Silicon Valley that, why don't I try this direction instead? So I did. And here I am now. It's my professional career, at least up until COVID, and hopefully it will be again. So I love what I do. I love photographing people, especially live concerts, but really anything having to do with people and connecting. That's really where my focus is. That
took a lot of bravery to stop and switch.
Or you
don't see it like that?
I think I saw it is that once I was off that Silicon Valley crazy train, I think that so many things about stopping work and being at home with my kids took a lot of bravery, that in some ways doing the photography was the least of that. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So it wasn't like I just, went out, started pounding the pavement looking for a full-time job. Doing the photography, I sort of edged into it with my kids and with other families that I knew. Going to my husband's an introvert. He didn't like going out very much. So the fact that I could go out to a concert by myself and that he didn't go, he was glad to be at home.
He's like, go.
Yeah, exactly. That worked out really, really well.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to invite our featured goddesses, Esta and Lara, on now. And we're going to ask you some more questions about your passion and your connection. Esta, would you like to start?
Sure. So I watched your video yesterday and I loved it. I was in Boston for 25 years and I'm very familiar with MIT. And it's phenomenal that, you were at such an amazing institution. And how did the photography, I saw that you were at the MIT Media Lab. I didn't even know they did anything with photography. So I'm just curious about your connection, how you stumbled into photography when you're at MIT and where the Media Lab came into, your inspiration and what you did and your motivation.
Yeah. So back when I was at MIT, I was what they call Course 4, which is basically all the arts and architecture and things like that. And I was actually, and that was all housed within the Media Lab. That was part of the department at the time. And it all really started for the most part. I'd taken all the visual classes are through Course 4 and they're through the Media Lab. And it had started out actually by taking a course called Creative Seeing. And that wasn't even photography, but it was known at the time as sort of a class that a lot of people, they punted on, that it was just really easy to get into. But so many people wanted to take that class. And I didn't want it because it was an easy class. It was something that I found easy. They actually had you take a test to get in.
Wow.
And you went and showed up at an auditorium at the Media Lab, and it was this piece of paper that was basically blank, I think, other than a circle. And they said, show us something creative about you.
Wow.
And to get in, and I actually pulled out my eyeshadow and my purse and my mascara, and I used all of those things to like put together, I think, a picture of a turtle. I don't know.
I love that.
But so that's how I got into my first class at the Media Lab. But the thing that really made a difference was that I went to go study abroad for a semester in Florence, Italy. And I was supposed to take a lot of architecture classes, but it turned out, because of where I was in my own program, I was too advanced for their beginning classes, but I wasn't advanced enough for their studio classes. So just on a whim, there was a photography studio, and like you could just do that and do it in Italian. And I thought, well, that sounds like fun. And that's what I started doing. Basically, I spent a semester abroad at Portman Studios in Florence and learned darkroom photography. And that's really what got me hooked. And then because I had that experience when I went back to MIT, they did offer photography classes at the Media Lab. And again, this was before digital. And your way around a darkroom. Will you be the TA for this class? Of course. And so I was the TA, and that's how I got my in there, and then started working with the school newspaper, shooting concerts.
That's a fantastic story. I love that.
I love the eyeshadow. I love the eyeshadow.
I love the
eyeshadow.
I love that there was like a competition to get into a class after you got into MIT. I mean, once you get into MIT, everything should be like smooth sailing. Now you have to
and it's the only time that they ever did that, and it was because it was all these people that had heard it was a sucker class. Basically, it had been written up in Playboy magazine. Awesome. As like, of all the institutions in the United States, like, what are the easiest classes? And it wasn't that it was a particularly easy class. I mean, I guess compared to doing computer science problem sets or something like that, it took a different part of your brain. But it, for me, it was just like the one fun time each week that, you could go off and creative seeing. I mean, that really said it all. Eben Fisher, I think, was the name of the guy that taught it. And I'm, forever thankful to, being able to see that it was all right to take classes like that, and that was worthy of, the pursuits of my mind.
So Laura has some questions related to your concert photography and your work with patients.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Paige. It's so exciting to meet you and hear your story. So I wanted to hear about your passion for getting involved with the PPE project when you had a little roadblock and had to take a turn because of COVID. And I'm so interested in the mind-body connection and healing. And I guess your compassion must have led you there to put a photograph to the doctors' faces when working with patients. And what was the response to that in terms of healing? Was that a big impact? Did that have an impactful experience for the patients seeing the photographs? Can you explain to us how that all worked?
Yeah, I'd love to. That's a wonderful question. So the way that I got involved in that was that my career just came to a crashing halt, as many parts of many people's lives did in March. And I just sat around consuming news 24/7 and, just in reading research papers and things like that about COVID. And my family just thought I'd gone off the deep end and were a little worried about me, I think. But I couldn't look at any of my rock and roll photography. And I didn't quite know what to do. And I've been watching the Stanford Grand Rounds. They do a weekly video podcast kind of thing about their current research. And there was an image there, and it just, one of those moments in your life where you just stopped. And it was this woman clad in PPE from head to toe. You could see nothing. But there was this image on a sticker, a large one in the front of her. And it was like, what's that? And, I paused and I looked at the name, and I heard PPE Portrait Project. And I thought, that is such a phenomenal idea. Like, who's doing that? How can I get involved? How can I photograph? And I was able to reach out and find out more about it. And luckily I'm, literally a mile away from Stanford. Although, my partner and I have never met in person. And I found out about the work that they were doing with trying to get healthcare workers that were clad in PPE these portraits so that they could connect with their patients. And the project was actually started by Mary Beth Heffernan at Occidental College during the Ebola pandemic of maybe 5 years ago. But Katie Brown Johnson, the researcher at Stanford, had picked it up with COVID. And she is the one that's been doing the majority of the work on trying to quantify, as you were talking about, what it's doing for patients and how it's helping with patient-provider connection. And so all of the research that's been done so far seems to show that it really aids in creating a warm connection and showing competence and in reducing fear in patients. We haven't gotten to do very much work yet because it's very hard to get into the COVID wards to actually speak with the patients about their experiences interacting with the PPE portraits. But that's the plan for the next 6 to 12 months. And in addition to the healthcare workers, I really thought, wow, there are so many people that are in a position of not being able to connect in the same way, in particular folks at assisted living facilities and in nursing homes with their care providers, and also with especially young students like preschool students, kindergarten students, with their teachers in school. And so that's what I decided to do, was try to expand the project to those other areas that hadn't gotten the attention yet.
Wow, and that's phenomenal. I'm in Canada, in Toronto.
Oh.
Yeah, and I know that was happening here too. It just is. I saw the same thing, and I think it's so important. That was breaking my heart to see how that connection was happening just in the masks and basically having no connection. So what an incredible thing that you're part of that. I actually was wondering if you've ever thought about providing portraits for the patients, because they're in this situation where they can't be seen. And it's something that I know family and friends who have brought pictures into hospital rooms. So if a patient's in a, ill and not obviously thriving at their best, the doctors and nurses can see them at a time where they might have been more vibrant. So
well, I wish that's the one thing that, everybody has a wish and a heart's desire. And in this project, that is my wish, is to be able to go in and photograph the patients. And I just keep on hoping that by putting that intention and putting that wish out into the world, that one day that'll be able to happen. Just as the family members can't get in, I can't get in. I've actually never been able to photograph somebody, a provider, even using a PPE portrait, let alone someone that was on the other side of it. There's just such limited access into the hospitals at this point. But I would love to do that, not only to photograph the connection between the provider wearing the PPE portrait, but also to photograph someone that's there in the hospital as well too.
I noticed that there's people who literally stand outside a hospital room and they're trying to contact, whether it's a mother, a father, a grandparent. But those pictures, I think, are pretty poignant to capture that moment where they can't get inside, they can't get on the other side of that wall. But you see the connection, you see them touching, the glass, and those, I think, photographs could be just as poignant as getting inside the hospital or the nursing room.
Yeah, and I think I've seen some of those images in particular from the nursing homes, where people are still well enough that they're, able to walk or get up to the windows. I think in a lot of the hospitals and things like that, the patients aren't necessarily on the ground floor, or often they're sick enough that they're not able to get out of bed to have that connection. Right. The interesting thing that's going on as well too is that some of the doctors and some of the families are using iPads and other things like Zoom to try to communicate and to bridge that gap. But as we all know, and I think the thing that we all miss the most is that face-to-face connection. And it's just so hard being in a world where we used to take that for granted. I know that I did. And that was just, I don't think I even realized, almost like, I don't mean that like I was evil like a vampire, but I mean, that was what I lived on. That is the energy between a performer in the audience, or even me and my friends, being able to be face to face and feeling that energy of connection between people. And that's what I miss so much right now.
Laura, I think you were referring to, correct me if I'm wrong, like when a patient, like your mom, when she was really sick. And so Laura and I are sister-in-laws. And my husband was telling me that when your mom was sick, they brought in a picture of her before she was sick so that doctors could see.
Yeah, I think in this...
Before she got into that state of looking very ill. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that what I was saying to Paige is that I think that this idea, obviously, this project was brought on in really trying times that no one ever could foresee. And it's just possibly something that will go forward. And for patients, I was thinking specifically it's with the masks. They're in the same situation as the doctors, and that connection and energy is blocked with that relationship and the nurses, and not to mention they can, the communication with their voices must be so challenging.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very difficult process to get a patient picture in everyone's room, or a patient badge, but I think that would be incredible. And then going forward, maybe it will be something that even doctors and patients could consider having as conversation pieces, just to have patients who are not looking at themselves anymore.
I agree. One of the things that I've done in the past, and one of the reasons that I was interested in working with the assisted living facilities, is that both of my in-laws, we moved them out from Philadelphia to the area 6 years ago as they began to struggle with dementia. And their caregivers never knew them as the vibrant, wonderful people that they were. And one of the things that I did that I think they both found to be a gift was putting together digital photo frames. And so they have, my mother-in-law passed away in January, but my father-in-law is still there. But before then, I made a photo frame for each of them, showing them when they were younger in their youth, and also with their grandkids, and work images. And the staff would talk, sure, my in-laws really liked them, but the staff would talk to me when I went there about, thank you for sharing these images. I never would have known that Charles was in the military, or to bring it up, or, I'll ask one of them, who's the little baby that's on your lap there? And it was a great conversation starter as well, too, because you're absolutely right. So many times when we're in a weak and compromised situation, the people that are caring for us don't always know the vast and rich lives that we had before we might have been in that situation where we're so dependent upon others.
It really humanizes people. And you mentioned teachers. I'm a preschool teacher. I'm currently teaching a pod. I think I mentioned to you that I'm a preschool teacher, but I'm actually now teaching a pod in my basement of kids. They wear their masks. I wear my mask. They've hardly seen me without my mask. And I do need to reach out to you to get the portrait. When we're outside, I'll put it down, but I stay, 6 feet away. And it's hard as a preschool teacher. You want to get close, and you want to have that connection. So it's really important for everyone. Can we go back now to when you were a photographer for bands and concerts, and tell us about that a little bit? I mean, you were right in the action. Your photos, you were like right there when the crowd they're doing crowd surfing, I think it's called, some of the band members, or they're sweating. Can you tell us about some of those experiences, perhaps?
Sure, yeah, and I'm glad you're asking them. I don't, right after the shutdown happened, I don't even think I could talk about it. It was just so hard to be apart from it. It's fine now. And there was a lot of grief that I went through in mourning that part of my life being gone for, and knowing it would be gone for so long. And that's how important it is to me. And I love being in the middle of it. I mean, and there's some work that I do at the Fillmore, for example. And I'm in what they call a photo pit. It's this area between the performer and the crowd. It's usually about 6 feet wide, and it's just really, really high energy. But in particular at music festivals, and I do a lot of what they call house photography for music festivals,
right.
especially the Outside Lands Music Festival. And I've done that for every year. I've photographed that every year that it's been in existence. But sometimes, especially with the energy of the crowd, you know, when a performer will come off stage, sometimes they'll crowd surf, sometimes they'll just be there at the edge. But I mean, that's my favorite thing. My motto always was, a festival's not a festival until I bring out my fisheye lens. And a fisheye lens is when you're within 6 inches of something. And I love just getting right in there. And it's not just, I love that. I love being able to capture what it's like to be up so close and to feel that energy, because there are tens of thousands of people at a festival, but yet it's only a handful that actually get to experience that particular moment and being up close when somebody goes out like that. And I want everybody to have a chance to feel a little bit of that energy, because it's just so powerful. And sometimes it's a little messy. I've gotten sweaty, you know.
I was going to say, did you get some sweat and saliva sprayed your way?
Saliva. And actually, I think the worst that ever happened.
I don't know if we want to know the worst. I'm not sure. No, I'm kidding. Another bodily fluid came your way?
No, it was the lead singer of the Murder City Devils at the Sasquatch Music Festival, and I didn't realize that he was on something. And when you have a fisheye lens, everything's really distorted. And I could kind of tell he was coming closer and closer and closer and closer and closer. But he came and he grabbed my camera and he rubbed it into his crotch. And I mean,
I was close. I was close.
Camera, so basically, he was just rubbing my head, and he wouldn't. And it was off. And there were these jumbotrons, so 70,000 people are seeing this go on. And I never understood what it meant to be reeling until this happened, and it was awful.
There could have been a lawsuit, just saying.
I know there could have been a lawsuit. And as I was walking out of there, half the people just sort of looked at me like, oh my God, that's awful. And the other half were like, yeah, rock and roll. But I mean, I was not happy about what happened in any way, shape, or form. But to make a very long story short, the woman that organized the photographers, Ashley Graham, reached out to me, was kind and compassionate. When the singer realized what had happened, he felt awful about it and reached out as well too. And I had told him, you know, what I want you to do to make it right is to make a private apology, which you've done to me, a public apology, and to make a donation to my favorite charity, the House Rabbit Society, which he did. And the crazy part was that a year later, when Ashley became the house manager and media manager for the Fillmore, she recognized me, and she knew that from that awful, and she said, hey, Paige, how about you give a try shooting here, and we'll see if this works out. So that awful, awful episode is responsible for the most wonderful thing in my music career that ever happened, with getting that job at the Fillmore. And so my job at the Fillmore wouldn't have happened without that. And I'm not happy that that happened, but yet, like so many things in our lives, you know, it's the, you know, it's the awful and it's the wretched and it's the good and the joyous and the glorious that go together, and they make that story of what our lives are. And I'm proud about how I handled it. And the other thing that makes me really happy is the gentleman, Spencer Moody, said, you know, I just want to thank you, because this really made me reconsider what I was doing with my life. And how I was impacting other people. And he went on to really make some changes in his life because of it. And so and he said, thank you for giving me the opportunity to apologize. You know, a lot of people wouldn't have, so.
That's an incredible story. We talk a lot about episodes that happen, or mistakes or roadblocks, and how they actually push you forward or come out on the other side. It just determines, like all of these serendipitous events. You never know. Yeah. Esther wanted to ask you some more questions related to photographing your subjects.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have so many other questions after I saw the video. This was so impromptu that I am here interviewing. So I do photography. I am nowhere near the level of where you're at. and the photos I do, I get in that moment. I don't pose people. I honestly, my thing is landscape and architecture. I'm not people. When I do get those moments, people say, oh, will you photograph me? No, because I capture that moment. So I'm wondering if you pose when you're doing portraits, you let them get relaxed and do their own thing, or do they say, you know what, this is my best side. This is the side I would like you to take. Or do you, say, look, trust me and let me do my thing? Like, is it an either or do they even ever ask you to just catch one side?
So this is a great question. So I, up until the pandemic, have had a lot of anxiety actually about taking portraits to begin with. So I am very much like you in that I just want to capture people in the moment. And so when somebody's on stage, no, they're not asking me to get a good side, bad side, anything like that. And occasionally I would do portraits of musicians. In particular, I worked with the Noise Pop Music Festival, and I would do their program guide, the cover of their program guide every year. And so I knew that it was going to be like a posed creative portrait. And it was just like, oh my God, I can't believe February is here again and I've got to do this. Like, it's just like it gave me, I'm not normally an anxious person, but that would give me a huge amount of anxiety for exactly the reasons that you're talking about, Esther. It's like, well, how do I pose them? What do I do? How do I know what they want to do? And I thought, like, who am I to be telling them how to pose? They're usually just so assured of themselves on stage. And so the funny thing is, though, that I'd always taken portraits of small children around my children's school, and they would just come up and they'd met me and they just look at me straight in the eye, and everybody'd say, wow, you've captured them. And yet in all these other contexts, it was always so hard. And that's been the amazing thing actually about the PPE portraits and what I do is that for somebody that's been so anxious about doing portrait photography her entire career, that's all I do now. And I mean, I don't do just like one or two a day. Oftentimes it's like 40 or 50 a day. And
so do you set up a studio, or do you just grab your camera and go out? Because when I think of a traditional portrait, for some reason, I think of a studio and the lighting and setting up everything. And, I guess that's what comes to my mind when I hear, professional portrait. Mm-hmm. So do you do that, or is everything just outside in the moment, wherever the environment is?
No, so even when I was doing like rock and roll portraits and I was doing the covers of these magazines and things like that, I've always worked with 100% found light outside. My favorite photographer is actually right here behind me. I've got a giant poster of his, Anton Corbijn. And he's always been my hero, and he's always done work with all of his portraits have been done with natural light in all kinds of different contexts, and pretty much never in a studio. And so I thought, if Anton doesn't have to use the studio, neither do I. And even with these PPE portraits, because we can't be close to each other, because I can't go into a hospital or into an assisted living facility, I always need to find some place with a plain background behind that I can shoot. And because it really is so close up on the face, the background doesn't matter so much. It's just the quality of light. And over time, with all the work that I've done, especially with the festivals, because they're during the day, you just learn to find really good light, basically even good quality light. Sometimes it's like in the shadow of a porch. Oftentimes it's in a garage, with the garage door open. That's beautiful light.
So that's a good tip.
It's never anything particularly special, and you just wouldn't know. So,
Paige, I know that you talked about grief, and I appreciate you sharing that because we're all grieving different things right now. And the fact that you mentioned that is so powerful for people to hear because, yes, it's a loss. I mean, hopefully it will come back again, but you needed to pivot, and you did. But you had to go through that. And Laura has some questions about the future moving forward with photography and grieving.
In this new pandemic life that we are witnessing unprecedented experiences, seeing empty venues and seeing sporting events going on and trying to improvise. And it was quite amazing seeing Major League Baseball and how they incorporated faces and photographs of people that you could send in. And that was interesting to see. And then in the NBA, they had video of people actually, I guess the video was live. So people's reactions were live while the game was happening. So do you think there's anything like that down the road that could be incorporated with concert venues for artists that want to continue and just keep it going in the meantime until things are back to normal?
That's an excellent question. And I think that there have been a few people that have been doing that. The one concert that comes to mind is Jason Isbell and his wife, Amanda Shires. They did a concert at I don't know if it's called the Brooklyn Bowl or it's the Brooklyn Bowl organization in Tennessee where they do Bonnaroo. And they actually were there at an open venue with about 20 video screens, and each one would show the faces of different people around the country live that were watching them perform. And I think just this past week, they actually did a live concert at the Cavern or the Caves, or maybe it's still coming up. Or no, it happened where they had little pods of people that were very separated. So it was only about 1/10 of the normal capacity, but there were some live people there as well. And the thing that's so hard with the music venues is that so much of what feeds a live performer is that energy from the audience. I can't speak for live sports, but I think that the energy is sure that helps somewhat, but I think that there's more dynamic between the players and the opposing teams. And so it's been a real challenge for live music, but it's wonderful to see the experiments that are going on. Another performer that I love, Andrew St. James, who works with the woman that I work for at the Fillmore, Ashley Graham. They've been actually going around in San Francisco and doing pop-up live concerts. He and a friend show up with a guitar, and it's just for 2 or 3 people. And it's really redefining what it means to be a concert and to be a live event. But people just begin to cry, and they tear up and they say, thank you. And he came down here in this area to do it at a friend's house for, maybe a dozen of us that sat out on the street. And I cried as well too, because it was the first time that I felt some normalcy, or I don't even know if that's how you pronounce the word, but basically it was just of my life as I remember it and what was important. And even though he was standing in the middle of a cul-de-sac in a suburb, it was the music that I remembered, and it was that connection that I valued. And he was there and performing for us live. And that really got to the heart of what was important. And so exactly how this will evolve, I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be some combination of, a few people there in person and many people watching remotely. There have also been some crazy suits. I don't know if you'd seen that early on, theoretically, that people could wear to seal themselves up and go to a concert. But I'm hopeful that there are so many creative people in this world that they can get us back to being together again to experience live music, because it is, people together and that connection that's so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's been so moving seeing some of the concerts or some of the live music that they've recorded, and it's been televised. Mm-hmm. And, combining it with fundraising and but in the meantime, I guess this is just a pause and we'll get back to normal. But
in fact, I did see the other night on the news actual bubbles that, we were laughing about it because we're like, we wonder how much that ticket is to get yourself a bubble. But that would be cool, Paige, if you could be in one of those bubbles up close, taking pictures through the bubble.
Yes. Well, and the irony of that would be that Wayne Cohn from the Flaming Lips always goes out into the crowd in a bubble. And I've photographed a dozen times in a bubble. And for me to be in the bubble photographing instead the other way out would be a very funny thing to be doing as well too.
Absolutely.
Around here, the other thing that's been going on, and I think in other parts of the country as well too, is that they've been making use of drive-ins. and people performing in a drive-in and having the cars come in as well too. In fact, Noise Pop has their first in-person concert coming up with Pink Martini here in the Bay Area, and it'll be cars that are coming in. The tickets are pretty expensive for a car of people. I want to say it's about $300 or something like that. So not available to everybody. But if you think about it, if you had 6 people in your car, that's actually pretty comparable to what a ticket was beforehand. I have no idea how it'll work out, but it's exciting to see people experimenting. And I hope that some of this creative energy makes its way into the new live performances, and that our performances are even better than they were before because of all this experimentation.
I'd like to just ask a question before we end, circling back to you, Paige. As a teacher myself, I have worked with children who have dyslexia. And I know that you had mentioned that you have it, and they can get very discouraged, feeling like they just can't keep up, can't do it. So I wonder how you felt about that and how you push yourself forward, because it's quite a roadblock. It can really hold you back.
That's a great question. I actually didn't realize that I had dyslexia when I was little. I just knew that I did mess up the spelling of everything all the time. I did transpose numbers and letters and mispronounce things sometimes. And people just said that I was lazy and sloppy, which was actually in some ways worse, because they just said, oh, if you just apply yourself, you would be, and I didn't understand, because as far as I was an enthusiastic, 100% in applying myself kind of person. And I didn't realize actually until my daughter was around 2nd or 3rd grade that she was dyslexic. And that when we went through that testing process, it was this big aha moment for me. It was like, oh, like all these things that I'd noticed in myself over the years, like I'm dyslexic too. And the thing that was actually great and that I want to share with anybody that is dyslexic or thinks they might be, or that is young, is that dyslexia is like a superpower. I mean, there are so many of us that we're never diagnosed, but dyslexia is really a learning difference. It's not a deficit, and it's about how one processes symbol systems. And so figuring out a new symbol system, whether it be numbers or letters for the first time, is a really hard thing to do. But the great thing is that with every deficit like this comes something that's much easier. And so visual storytelling, understanding patterns, being able to think on the fly and doing systemic thinking. All the researchers have found that people with dyslexia are much, much better and have a huge number of skills in those areas. And so when you're little, you don't get to use a lot of those skills. It's all based on learning, your times tables and things like that. But the fantastic thing is, once you get beyond those things that are really hard, for me in particular, in high school, and certainly once I got to college, everything was so much easier. I mean, a lot of things that other people struggled with, it was just very easy for me, because that's where my superpowers came out. And so I'm so proud that I'm dyslexic. I'm so proud that I'm the mom of 2 dyslexic kids.
Yeah,
so.
I love that you're saying that. And I hope our listeners, viewers are listening, especially if you're a parent, because as a teacher, when you try and explain that to parents, it's very hard for them to hear. So here we have Paige Parsons, who is extremely creative and able to tap into her inner connections with people and be authentic. And you have dyslexia, and it's not seen as something negative. So that's spectacular. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, can I put a plug in as well, too?
Please. Yes.
There's an organization founded by Brock and Fernette Eide called Dyslexic Advantage. I'm actually on their part of their, I don't know if you call it their board, or there's sort of like a think tank of people that work with them, and I'm one of them. And I've spoken at their conferences before, and their whole organization, the point is to be able to talk about the upside of dyslexia. And so any parent, anybody, go to dyslexicadvantage.org. There are so many resources. They've written several books about this as well, too. And they're fantastic free resources for anybody that might be struggling with some of these concepts.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Before we wrap it up, do you, Lara or Esta, have any other questions for Paige?
Paige, I wanted to ask you specifically about your work in the community with education. And I know you were very involved in photographing and spreading your power of positivity with students and teachers and parents. And I'm curious to know if there was ever a moment where someone looked at a photograph of themselves that you had taken and really had a deep moment of reflection to say, wow, like, did they have any life-altering moments looking at a photograph? Or did parents ever reach out to you to thank you for these amazing moments that you captured?
That's a great question. So the answer, so I get it from parents an awful lot. And I love, that's my favorite thing. And in fact, in the version of the talk that you might have seen, I don't talk about that as much, but the funny part is that of course that happens at the schools that I've worked with and things like that. But I've gotten like calls and been reached out to rock stars' parents that talk about how I've captured, the essence of their kid, which they're not kids anymore. They're grown adults. But that's really special to me. And that's what I live for. And that's what I love about Peninsula School in particular, because I think that this is what I know after all these years of photographing, is that being in a place where a child or anybody, but a child in particular feels comfortable and they feel seen and they feel known, that just the kinds of images and what you can document and capture there is really special. And I do see that with a lot of those kids at Peninsula School. I taught a couple of what they call choices, like their short courses there with their middle school kids. And it's exciting now to see some of them that are off at college and have decided on using photography of an aspect of their studies of the work that they do. Jacob Scharfman is a world-class free climber, rock climber in particular, that I think of. And not only does he do this climbing, but he documents the work of other climbers. And I am just blown away by his work. And I talk with his mom from time to time, and she says, "Thank you, Paige. You're the one that lit this, fire in him about the photography, through doing this choice that you did when I think he was in 5th or 6th grade." So sometimes you don't know it, especially with the kids at the time, they don't speak of it, but it's great to hear sometimes years later that something that you did, either taking a photo or in particular, because I worked so much to try to show the kids, you can take these photos too, because they're often the ones that have the connections with their classmates, and that they have that power within them. So
that's phenomenal.
Oh, I've learned so much on this call. I think that this has been terrific. From where you started, going to MIT, going to the PPE. I mean, you've led a terrifically full life. And I loved when you spoke about the dyslexia. I have no idea how you got into MIT having dyslexia, because normally it's an overcompensation in another area and not the academics. It's the overcompensation, like more of a street. I could get like Cher, like getting away with not needing to read, and overcompensating in other areas of your life. So that's phenomenal to me that you got into MIT. Like,
I don't want to say most, but I will say that like a huge portion, more than a quarter, maybe even half, of the people at MIT are dyslexic. I mean,
wow.
Some people have a lot more difficulties with it, but it's those same things that are hard to begin with that are the skills later on, especially the if you're a mechanical engineer coming out of MIT, more than half of them are dyslexic.
Wow.
I know this.
That's a numbers thing.
That's it is.
Crazy.
Surgeons as well too. Because you have to be able to
the wrong thing. Okay.
You have to be able to troubleshoot. You have to know exactly visually where things are, and those are skills of dyslexia.
Right.
I was also talking with someone else that I know whose son is dyslexic and has ADHD and is a physician's assistant and works in the OR, and was saying, all those OR docs, they are all ADHD.
Because that makes sense. I'm ADHD, but the dyslexia is a separate switch,
Yeah. They're
literally.
often comorbid as well. You often see the two of them together as well. So I have ADHD as well too. But luckily, I'm for the most part able to focus myself. I do go off on a tangent, but
Well, either you hyper focus or you're off on tangent. Like I find that I either hyper focus on something. I'm really happy I don't have Photoshop because it's too many decisions, honestly, for me. Do you use Photoshop? Do you ever photo alter your photos? That would be a good question.
Yeah, so I don't know that I would say I alter the photos. I mean, I have Photoshop. What I use much more often is another Adobe product called Lightroom.
Yep,
and Lightroom, it's much more like a digital darkroom in that I can make things a lot brighter, or I can make them darker, or I can burn and dodge and things like that. So have I ever removed a Crystal Springs water bottle from a stage picture? Yes.
Right. Okay.
Or a booger out of some famous lady's nose,
I do. Yeah.
But, only in the sense of like trying to make, everything just a little bit more as I remembered it. And I never remember, boogers or spit or water bottles.
Right. So now I'm understanding that you're into digital and not film.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So everybody, I'm going to take a picture.
Oh my God.
You don't have to pose, or you can. Are you ready?
Yep.
And I'm so glad that we captured your inner goddess, Paige. You are in alignment with what you're passionate about. And that's exactly the message of Grateful Goddesses, is feeling all of those things. Even if you're feeling grief and you were having with dyslexia, flipping it around and seeing it as something positive and it helping you to push forward. And now what you're doing with PPE and embracing that is just incredible. And if our listeners and viewers would like to contact you about the PPE or anything else, how can they do that?
There are a couple different ways. The best way, you can email me. I'm very public with my email address. I'm Paige, Paige, @parsons.org. You can also find me online and see my imagery at parsons.org, or on Instagram at Paige Parsons. And all the PPE portrait work you can find at ppeportrait.org as well too.
So viewers and listeners, please stay tuned for after the show. You'll get to see a little bit more about Paige. And Paige, thank you so much for joining us on Grateful Goddesses.
Oh, thank you, Karen.
Thank you.
I'm so glad that we accidentally met.
I am too. And
Serendipitously met.
Serendipitously.
Serendipitously.
Thank you.
Up next, favorite things. Opening up to happiness and joy.
So here we are at Favorite Things on Grateful Goddesses, like an adult show and tell. When I was going through my photos, because we wanted to share favorite photos today, there are so many favorite photos that I have, right? Some are posts, some aren't. But because Lara, Featured Goddess, is here, my sister-in-law, you're going to laugh. You're going to die when you see this photo. So Lara came to visit me here in Chicago with her kids, and our daughters, I don't know what they were thinking, but they put on these outfits, and I stopped them and snapped a picture. And it's hysterical. They are, I don't know, my two daughters, well, this is her daughter and her daughter, my daughter and my other daughter. I guess they decided to do matching costumes, outfits. I don't remember what they were doing, but I think I captured this moment. I think I got the moment, right, Paige?
Yes, you did. I mean, it's just, there's so much joy and happy, and they're just so owning their expressions as well too. They're trying on a persona, and it's just so lovely. So what a beautiful image.
I love seeing a picture I haven't seen either, and the sisterly bond there. They're big.
Right. They had matching. They were dancers, I think. I don't know, but they were just having fun, being kids, being joyous, just trying on everything that we had in our house to put together these costumes. And that's what I love with kids, that you can capture them in these moments of just having fun and being joyous. So I wanted to show that today. Lara, what picture did you bring?
Okay, so I'm excited to show this because my family went apple picking. And I have all adult children. My youngest is 18 and my oldest is 23. And my youngest daughter said she wanted to go apple picking as a family. So there was a little bit of resistance to get everyone together to go. And but once we were there, we had such a great time. And everyone started shooting pictures, of course. That was a photo shoot moment for my youngest daughter who really wanted to go. But I said, guys, I have to find this picture of my mom that I knew I had on my phone. I searched up in Dropbox to find this picture of my mother, and she passed away 25 years ago. So I look back at all of these pictures that my dad had captured, and he was a great photographer. So luckily, I found on my Dropbox this picture of my mom apple picking, and it's one of my favorite photos. And it just, honestly, this just brings me so much joy. So what I decided to do is to take the same shot myself. And I mimicked it, and now I have both of these pictures of me and my mom. And I'm excited to share this today because I was debating if I should post it. And I didn't want to post it because sometimes it brings lots of joy, but sometimes it brings a lot of emotion. Mm-hmm. And this is just something I'm going to cherish because my kids helped me do it too. So I feel like I shared a moment with my mother.
That's beautiful. That's
a beautiful image. Yeah,
it really is. Thank you for sharing that. Esther, what did you bring?
It's actually in a book. I don't have the actual photo, but it was the first photo I did that got me into my photography. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yes. Can you describe it?
Yeah.
It is snow-swept beach. So there's an ocean you can see on the top part of the line. I was on the beach in a few feet of snow. So I don't know if you can you see it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So it was like in 2010, I was waist deep in snow, and I just like went on the beach, and Paige will laugh because it was taken with a 3 megapixel, and it actually made it into the Asbury Park Press, which is a pretty big paper around here. And it was the first thing that because everybody was like, oh my God, like to see it was, it was really pretty. I think it was the same day, but I don't know if you can see the people.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it was me and them, and there was nobody else there. But that's what got me, that one photo is what got me into photography. So, it was so rudimentary, but it was the one thing that somebody validated something that I did that was, was good. And it encouraged me to keep doing it. So, had somebody said, oh yeah, that's all right. And I may not have like taken a camera or bought a camera, or it's those little moments that matter, that pivot what direction you're going in. It's like a pinball machine when you're hitting the flippers and then the ball goes here and the ball goes there. Those little moments are like a flipper. It's like hitting you in another direction and you don't know what's coming. So, and you don't know what direction you're going to go. So I actually did wind up having my own photography show at a little gallery. And then I was part of another show in Asbury Park. So I'm nowhere near the caliber you are, but it's fun and it inspires me. And on my website, I say capturing one moment of truth, one snapshot at a time. So I just don't know about anything in life, but I know in that exact moment, it's true. And that's it, just in that moment.
I'm so glad, Esther, that it's your first appearance as a featured goddess. You are joined with our guest, Paige, because of your passion. Paige, what did you bring to share your favorite photo? I know it's probably hard for you to pick one, but
it actually wasn't hard for me to pick one.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure.
No, and in fact, I'm actually kind of glad that I, with my dyslexic, ADHD brain. I wasn't even aware of it. So hearing about it just beforehand, it was a gut thing to reach for it. And of course I knew where it was because it's hanging in my entry, and it's an image that I took of my grandmother. And, I might get a little teary eyed, but that's okay because I miss her and I love her so much. She passed away 6 years ago, almost to the day, from now. And, I went out this is my grandma.
Oh, wow. You look like her.
Yeah, I do. As I get older, I'm starting to look.
I could see the shape of the face, the cheekbones, and
yeah.
What was she looking at?
So we were sitting at a park together, and my daughter, I think actually she was just trying to get away from me at the moment, like kind of like, oh, Paige in your camera. And she actually had on a really, I'll just say it, ugly, like lime green top. And that's how I ended up processing this in black and white. But I'll bring it in a little bit closer, but you can see it's just her eyes in particular.
It's beautiful. It's stunning.
Really beautiful.
And you could tell, and so there are a lot of them, but it was this one in particular. And I think that she's just sort of within herself and trying to not think about the fact that I am photographing her at the moment, but we're just sitting actually at a beach near a lake that we'd gone to with my kids just to have a little bit of fun. We went out. She lived in Syracuse, as all my mom's family does and did. And I would go out at least once a year, if not twice a year, to see her. We were very, very close. And my favorite part, and she would be irritated with me, but I don't really care. I'm going to bring it in close. There's a hair down here on her chin. And at the time when I went to go take this picture, we're sitting there and I'm like, Baba, there's a hair on your chin. And she's like, I said, I am not going to Photoshop that hair out if you don't let me pluck her. And she's like, I don't care if there's a hair on my chin. And
good for her. Good for her.
Yeah. And that's I love so many things about this, but I love the fact that she was fine with that. And that, it's there, and it's
the authenticity.
The authenticity and her wrinkles and her eyes, and it's just so her. And so it makes me so happy that even though she's not here anymore, I get to be with her all the time. And just, what this image evokes for me and the love and connection. It really just sums up everything to me that's important about connection and people and love and photography. So
I love this looking up. I love that.
And I love too that we shared photographs, because like Lara, that picture of your mom biting that apple, like your dad capturing that moment, and Paige, you capturing that moment, and Esther, you capturing that moment, and me. That's what photographs are, capturing moments. And even though this is a really hard time right now that we're going through, we know that we've had memories of great moments. We hope in the future to have more. And even now, going through this difficult time, to capture the PPE and the moments of connection is so important. It's all so important in the photography and photographs. So thank you for sharing favorite things and for joining us again today, Paige.
Unleashed your inner goddess yet? Thanks for joining us today on Grateful Goddesses. We invite you to visit our website, www.gratefulgoddesses.com, to access today's show notes as well as other helpful resources. Don't forget to leave a review. Until next time, stay strong and empowered to be a grateful goddess.